I'm not wearing anything on my lips, which makes it look like I don't have lips. We're just gonna fix that up real quick. Real quick. Hello. Everything looks so much darker than usual, I feel. Oh, we'll work it out. We'll work it out. Ah! Make sure settings are going. Settings are going. So I was having issues getting my microphone connected on here, which is speak lame, but it's okay. We got it working. Let me just. And now you can see my pretty little candle in the corner here. I like candles. I don't care about fire hazards. I like candles. This feels like a different angle than we're used to, but that's okay. You know why? Because this is on a little dinner table, so it's easy to move. That's better. This feels better. Everything is just moving as I move. Like I'll move one thing and then the entire setup moves. That's good. That's solid. I'm wearing sweatpants because it is Hawaii. It's soaking wet everywhere. Like it's pouring rain everywhere. It has been for like the past month or two. It's supposed to stop Saturday. We'll see. Hopefully it stops earlier. But again, we'll see. So I have been working a lot on book writing, a lot on book editing, getting this book ready for it to be published. I've also been working on some new vlogs, like working with these for some new vlogs. You'll see about that at some point, and you'll see it even sooner with Patreon. Just let you know, patrons get early access to all of my videos, all of my vlogs. They get the first chapter of my book for free. Throwing it out there, just throwing it out there. But that ain't what you're here for. Friends, we are here to talk about the book The Star Wars Lost Stars by Claudia Gray. Yeah, no, like I know you might have seen the title. We are not talking about the new Star Wars movie that came out like last month. We're not talking about that today. I don't want to talk about it. If you really would like me to talk about it, let me know in the comments and I'll get there. Whenever I'm emotionally strong enough to work with that piece, I'll get there, I promise you. But that's not what we're talking about today. Today we are talking about the book Lost Stars, A Star Wars Story, written by Claudia Gray. It is canon. Now let me just let's start off with like this book. What I ended up doing with this, because it was like a 500 or it was probably not 500 pages, but it was a long book. I would not have been able to finish reading it if I had like just read it. But I did end up listening through the audiobook. And let me just say, an A+ for the story. Claudia Gray wrote some good shit right there. It was beautiful. I loved it so much. That was great. But as well, like also let's give out some claps for Pierce, I believe was the name of the man who narrated it. He did amazing. And then next, for whoever did the audio, who's the audio tech for that thing, because like they had like music and Star Wars score intertwined with the audiobook. It was like I honestly don't know if it's still on Audible for some reason. Like whenever I try to like look it up in store, stuff like that, it's just giving me a lot of trouble doing that. But if it is, y'all need to get it because it was so good. It was so good. You don't even know it. Let me go over it for you. So, and even let me also explain, you don't need to be like super detailed on like the Star Wars universe to be able to read this book. Like technically, really, you don't even really need to have seen any of the Star Wars movies, any TV shows, anything like that. None of that is really necessary, but there is the assumption that you've at least seen the original trilogy. That's basically all, and it's mostly because these characters exist in that storyline. So it's like just kind of seeing these things go down, things they don't know, stuff like that. But there is a big assumption that you've seen at least the original trilogy. But other than that, like, yeah, there's some animals that they reference that, like, unless you've either looked them up or you are like super intense at the Star Wars stuff, you're probably not going to know. I don't know what the hell a Muniac is. That's fine. I don't need to know. Like, it's not like such a big deal that I don't know these things. But yeah, so let's start out. So we start out, we've got these two kids, Ciena Ree and Thane Cairo. So they are both just super young kids, and they live on, what was the planet name? That's also a thing. There's so many planets. There's so many planets going on. What? Jellucan. He knows. They live on Jellucan. And the thing with Jellucan is you have this group of people that were the first to migrate over onto this planet. And they're very simple people, simple pleasures, quote unquote, would be considered a lower income maybe area. Like they wear like maybe some brown rat style clothes, some just brown casual, don't have a lot of like worldly possessions because it doesn't matter that much to them, and they're very, very, very focused on their honor, and the promises they make to the people around them. That is super important to them. Then you have the second waivers, who were the next group to migrate onto the planet. They are the exact opposite. They like their things, and they think lower of the first waivers. So Ciena is of the first waivers. Thane is the second waiver. They're both really young kids, both super into like flying and all of the different like flight and ships that the Empire has. So the Empire is having some form of like ceremony, celebration, and the kids run off to go investigate some of the ships. Thane sees Ciena like about to get jumped by a bunch of guys because she is of the lower class, and he defends her. Then they are protected, not protected as much as just like a higher authority like of the Empire comes out, scares off the other kids. Those two are like, oh my god, hi, like it's not our fault, and they become friends after that. They spend basically the rest of their childhood flying planes together, training with each other, studying with each other, because they both really want to be a part of the Imperial military. And that's another thing that I really appreciate about this book, especially if you were to start off with this book as your first introduction to Star Wars. The way that it is, like in the movies, like the Empire is very much presented as villain. You have these like hooded figures that are super villainous. But in this book, you see more of a balance of it, of like, yeah, they might be going about leadership in like a very strict, kind of cruel way, but they're not like super horrible, terrible people. Like they're doing things. Hello? Am I getting audio still? I'm getting audio. Okay. It stopped giving me notification. It's the like microphone thing over here stopped working, so it freaked me out. But you see more of a balance of they do these things and they do it, and it seems like they care about the people that they are working with to a degree. They just don't like showing it as much, and it shows more of a balance of things between how the Empire themselves within themselves interact and work, as well as just how other people view the Empire, because again, you have Angelican, Cyanus people, they were like demeaned and they were looked down upon for generations. But now the Empire has come and has given them the chance and said, hey, everyone gets the same opportunities to be able to actually be a part of something bigger than these like petty center like planetary disputes. Everyone gets the same opportunities, whether you are a part of this first wave or second wave group. And that is something that they have valued so much. And so they, as a people, have put so much loyalty into the Empire because of this chance and this equal opportunity that they have been given by the Empire. So yeah, Sienna and Thane, they work hard, they do great, and both of them end up getting, after all of the tests and stuff, sent to the one of the top ranking Imperial academies. So they study there. They're working hard, still doing great, still friends, until there's an assignment with a blaster. Your job is to try and put back together this blaster. And when it came time to present him from the class, Thane's was tampered with. Thane's had been tampered with. The programs of the programs in the school that like keep track of who has been in and who has been out says the only person that would have had time to have tampered with his project was Sienna. And they are both like, no, we wouldn't do it. You wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. We're cool. Let's figure out what happens. And their friend Jude, who is kind of awkward, really like stats, statistics, fact-based type of person. She is probably the best person in this entire academy, if not the best person in this entire academy, with like numbers and logic and figuring out any forms of math, stuff like that. So she goes into the programming of the computer and finds that the trail of all of this leads up to a department in the school, the Department of Student Outcomes. Thane's like, oh my God, these people set us up. They don't want two kids from like an outer world, because you have like the center world that's super like rich and they have the direct access to like the most funds and the most the most monetary items, whereas like the outer rim worlds are poor, polluted, and have a lot of issues that they just don't get help tending to. And he's like, they don't want to like outer rim kids being successful, and it just boosts and it makes them feel even better that like some senator's kid is going to get boosted up to the top of the rankings. And Sienna's like, why would you attack them like that? Why would you say something like that? Like, it's not everything is some sort of conspiracy. And then she says a thing. So Thane has like a lot of home issues, specifically with his parent. Like all of his family is terrible. His brother's terrible. His mother doesn't really care, and his father is abusive. And so she makes the comment of like, not everything's a conspiracy. You can't go around thinking that every authority figure is as terrible as your dad. And so they aren't friends for the next 3 years because of this. And it's really the scene going through this like 3 years. It's not like we don't get a ton of information going over these 3 years, but when we do get is really important information of it's them competing against each other. They're competing against each other because they are the best students in the class. And so they are competing regularly to try and just switch up those rankings, who's one, who's two. And when you go through these competitions, you get a lot of information that otherwise you wouldn't really get. For instance, like they're having an argument about, it's not an argument, but they're in class and the teacher asks, hey, if a Star Destroyer has been boarded, what should you do? Thane says, oh, you should do this sequence because it would give the crew the most amount of time to escape. And then she's like, oh no, what you should do is you should seal off the room. You should seal off Captain's room with the captain's word, because no one's going to be able to figure that out. And you should crash it into the nearest planet, star, whatever, so that way whoever boarded the ship also doesn't get that amount of time to escape or take over the helm. And like seeing those scenes is interesting because you see not only because these things are going to come in later, and it's interesting. It's good to see like the story being weaved this way, where you see it's not forced into the scene at all, but you see something that's going to come in hand later, as well as just see how even these parts where they're angry with each other, they still know each other in that way. Also, speaking of things that are coming to play later, there is a side bit that we learned in like the first chapter. Sienna had a sister who passed away like 7 days. They were twins, and her sister passed away like 7 days after they were born. And so Sienna lives life for the both of them. And whenever something really amazing or really terrible happens, she wants her sister to experience it with her. So she says, "Look through my eyes." And she has this little leather bracelet that she wears that ties her to her sister. And when she's in like Imperial uniform and whatnot, she keeps it in her pocket because it's technically not against regulation to have stuff in your pocket. But as I was going on, so they aren't friends for a while. Then really what happens is after like this 3 or so years of them not being friends, there's a nice big ball going on. Jude decides she wants to buy Sienna because Sienna wouldn't be able to afford a dress for this. Jude's like, "You're not going to wear your uniform. I'm going to buy you a dress because we're friends. Let me do this for you." And so she buys Sienna a dress. And Thane sees what really happens is Thane sees Sienna in the dress. He gets really horny. And so now he doesn't like he's the entire like dispute they've been having over his head. He doesn't care. And so they try to like talk to each other about it, but then it comes up again, the whole issue with the blaster and whatnot. And it turns out this department had done it, but it wasn't because they were racist. They did it because they didn't want these two kids so tied to each other and so tied to their home world. They wanted them to be more focused on being citizens of the Empire. They've made up. He was still really horny, but he decided to wait because they had just become friends again. And they're now, I believe this is their graduation. They've graduated from school, and now they're off into their actual military duties. And this is, they get graduated. She goes to work on a Star Destroyer. I believe it is actually Darth Vader's Star Destroyer that she's working on, like the main Darth Vader Star Destroyer. And then he goes to work off on some super secret base that no one knows anything about. And this is the reason why it's one of those things where they assume you've at least seen a couple of movies, because it's like it's this super secret base no one knows anything about. But at the same time, we know what time period it is because they're talking about Princess Leia and the fact that she is about the same age as these two kids. And so they go off to their work. We find out that it is the Death Star, and they use the Death Star to destroy Alderaan. Everyone is just so depressed about it because that's a full planet. But you see these people on the Empire justifying it as like there was just like this was their idea. The rebels are getting more aggressive. They are killing more people. This is their idea of trying to stall an even bigger war and save more lives. So that's how people that are fighting for the Empire are justifying it. Even people who were from Alderaan, because they're like the entire Alderaan like royalty system had been corrupt and had fallen prey to the rebels like propaganda. And there's just nothing else we could have done to be able to try and like hold off on this war. And you like the other scene that like really gets me every time is there's when like you get to see everyone's fighting and everyone's like prepping for this battle they're having a battle with the rebels who are all in TIE fighters, and then suddenly all of their communications go blank. Everyone's super confused. No one knows what's going on. Sienna is sent. She and her small crew go and they pick up Darth Vader, who is floating around in space because he was on the Death Star, and they find out that the Death Star had been destroyed. And they're like, how did it get destroyed by a TIE fighter? And you find Cheyenne is going through some emails and some like stuff before the Empire, and she sees a message from Jude, from that computer person who was a friend who was on the Death Star, who's working on the Death Star, and her friend had tried to notify somebody about the fact that there was an exhaust port that had it, if it got shot down, would potentially be lethal for the entire Death Star. And so you have like chapters of just trying to come to terms with the fact that like a lot of people they cared about had died. A lot of people who were just like hanging out, eating lunch, taking a nap, all died and didn't know they were about to die. And then you had this one person who had tried to warn others and then was there on the ship when these TIE fighters started flying in, and potentially was just fearing for her life until the end. And so that was a really impactful thing to see and to experience when seeing this destruction of the Death Star. God, I'm running out of time, and there were so many things I wanted to talk about. But so you have Sienna and Thane. Thane is getting very disillusioned with the Empire to the point where he does desert. Sienna is scheduled because they lost a lot of people on the Death Star. So she is like sent out to go find him, and if he returns to duty, then there won't be any punishment. She finds him on Jellican. He's like, I'm not going back. And they make love. She goes back and reports that he committed suicide. He ends up joining the rebels. He'd always never really felt comfortable with the rebels. He always thought they were terrorists, that they were extremists, and that they were so like the talk they had. He never believes in the Force. He thought the Force was a whole bunch of boohickey. And so but when he does join them, it's because he on like a random on this like ship that he's been working on. He's trying to get parts for the ship, and he sees a bunch of stormtroopers abusing people of the city, and he doesn't like the fact that because he's wanted, he can't do anything to stand up for those people, and so he fights with the rebels so he can feel like he has the voice to be able to stand up for what's right and wrong. And she like the only thing that I like, it wasn't an issue, but there were times where it got really corny, sometimes throwing these characters into the scenes. Particularly, I believe it was the Battle of Hoth on the icy planet, the cold ass planet, and like just seeing them like just kind of thrown into the scene as opposed to having much really like experiencing the scene. It felt more like they were like copy pasted, like photoshopped into the scene, as opposed to they were experiencing this situation in that like one particular scene. But Sienna watches back the videos of the Battle of Hoth because she's trying to figure out how these rebels escaped all of their AT-ATs, and she recognizes Flying. She's super upset that she finds out he is a rebel now. They meet again because she has to go to Jellican. Her mom's accused of a crime, and it's a part of their rituals to stand with her. And he goes as well because he finds out and he doesn't want this to break her. They have sex again. She's still upset that he's on the rebels, but she's not going to report him. They separate. And now we're getting to a point where Sienna's higher and higher in the rankings of the Empire because more people keep dying. She's also very devoted to them and very like just appreciative and very loyal. So you have another scene where so far at this point in the book, everyone is under this understanding that Thane has committed suicide. And now she's in this, given orders to go with a couple other TIE fighters to monitor this area, and she has to make sure they are under the impression that these are rebel spies. She has to make sure that at least one of them gets out so they can notify the rest of the group. And they do this. She follows them out, and Thane happens to be a part of the spy group. One of their old friends happens to be with her on her side, and everyone is just freaking out. And now this guy who also has like this huge crush on Sienna is just livid that Thane has betrayed her. But we find out why they needed one person to go out, because now we see the second Death Stars come into play. She is completely shaken and broken by the fact that this thing happened. And it's just, she's not okay with it because she doesn't believe, like, maybe she could justify the first usage of it. She doesn't believe that there's any reason why they would have to have a second one unless they were going to use it, and they should not be using it. They're all fighting, and she's in a TIE fighter. She's in a smaller ship when the second Death Star explodes, and it causes her to be put on like a life support belt. She can walk around and stuff after she's like had some time to go through physical therapy, but she has to be on this life support belt, and it's not fun. She's not okay. She's not having a great time with it. She's also very much over. She's no longer trusts the Empire, no longer feels that she like is bound by oath, but she doesn't feel like she should be loyal to them anymore. She doesn't trust this group anymore. And yeah, she's completely disillusioned. Now we get to the final Battle of Jakku, because after the second destruction of the Death Star, again, a lot of people died. So there have just been, including the Emperor Palpatine, Vader, and all the other like main highest ranking officials of this group. And so now they are left to go ahead and try. There's a bunch of people like grabbing for power because there's a power vacuum now. Rebels have their own section where they feel comfortable, but they're still fighting. There's still war. And so for the Empire, she's still fighting. Ciena is still fighting, and she is given the title of captain and given her own Star Destroyer to captain. And they end up taking the Star Destroyer into a new battle, the Battle of Jakku. And so they're at Jakku, and a bunch of rebels board her ship. So like we referenced earlier on, like 20 minutes ago, she holds down the entire area with the captain's password and she's going to crash it into Jakku because Thane is one of the rebels that is boarded the ship, and so he has taken down all of the abilities for her to explode the ship and blow up the ship to keep it out of rebels' hands. She sends a message over the intercom telling everyone they have 10 minutes to get off, and he hears it and he's like, oh my god, I have to save her life. He goes. They like have a full wrestling scene while the plane is like trying to crash into Jakku, and he wrestles her into a escape pod. They escape. The Star Destroyer is destroyed, and when they are rescued, she is put in jail because she's an Imperial captain. She is a high-ranking official in the Empire. She is a criminal to them. And a scene that I really appreciate when she's going through this is the lines have been redrawn and I'm on the wrong side. Because again, things like this are all about point of view. So at the end of the book, you see my little sick boy. We see Thane and Ciena. They're like joking about what's going to end up happening to her. She's like, I'm going to get put in jail. He says, if there's any good in this world, then they will give you a break. We are looking for highly skilled people, and I will put in a word for you wherever I can. So if you can, because he knows Mon Mothma, the new leader of the New Republic. And so he's like, I will put in a word for you wherever I can. And I bet you, we're going to make a bet. I bet you are going to get released and in like a couple days, maybe a week. And so that's what's going on this side. The other side is you see the guy that had a crush on her that's super irritated and hates Thane now. He is now commanding his own fight ship, and he is helping to plan another strike on the rebels in Ciena's name because everyone is under the impression that she has given up her life to crash the Star Destroyer in Jakku. And that is why I feel like there should definitely be a sequel to this book, because we definitely have a conflict between him and then the couple of Ciena and Thane that's 100% going to happen. This guy's sick. He's sicky. But he's still jumping all around the place all crazy. So yeah, that was Lost Stars. It's, again, a long book, as you can tell by the length of this stream. I just finished. I skipped over a lot of things, but still, It's long, but it's really, really good. I loved this book. It's probably, if it might be like my favorite book. I loved it so much. I want a sequel. And again, I really do appreciate having that point of view of the empire from someone who has been helped out so much by the empire, and seeing like how a lot of the other things, reasons why she justified, why Santa justified staying with them was, yes, there's bad parts to the empire, but there's bad parts to any government. And if all of the good people left, then what would we have? And it's so good. I think everyone should read this at some point. It's so good. I loved it so much. But yeah, other than that, that's everything. That's all I have for you in terms of this book, and we're also out of time anyway. The next book that I'm going to be reading is going to be Critical Failures. It's a Dungeons and Dragons style book because I'm still a nerd, and I think it might be Audible exclusive. I don't know. I know I'm again listening to the audiobook on Audible, so there's that for you. But yeah, that's the plan so far. Critical Failures. If you can see more about it on my Patreon, you can see more about that, my book that I'm writing, and everything else that I'm doing on Patreon. You can support me for as little as $2 a month, and you get a ton of cool prizes. Like if you submit some writing to me, I'll go ahead and like I can help go through it and help you work on what you're working on and whatnot. You know, cool. You get me. They get me. He gets me. But until next time, valedictions, friends.